All right, man. Welcome back to the God Center Men's Recovery Show. I am your host, Tim Holloway. I'm glad to be back at you again. Hey, look, this is a show dedicated to Christian men inside of recovery to live an awesome spirit-filled life. If that is you, you definitely come to the right place, and I am glad that you are here. So we're going to dive right in. We're going to go into the recovery quote of the day. I am not defined by my relapses, but by my decisions to remain in recovery despite of them. Now, I find this quote to be very positive and very encouraging because we all sin and we all fall short of the glory of God. And what that means is that we have a propensity to make mistakes, and I'm guaranteed to make them. And so knowing that and understanding that mistakes are part of the process helps me to be a lot more graceful towards myself when I do make mistakes. Here's the reality that recovery is much like walking. Coming out of infancy and beginning to make progress into walking, okay? And the child doesn't learn to walk overnight. And this goes through a process of discovery, a process of try, fail, try, fail, try, fail. And this is just the reality of what recovery looks like. And it doesn't mean that your relapse is expected or that you should expect to relapse. But what it does mean is that there are going to be mistakes. They may be times where you do fail or falter. And I find that this mindset to be very devastating because if we don't think that we're going to make any mistakes, we're horribly wrong, first off. But then we set ourselves up for this mindset of, oh man, I got 90 days and I messed up and I need to start back over at the beginning. When this is not reality. You don't need to start back over. Now, if you're one of those time counters and you're keeping track and it gives you some sort of elated pride for the certain quantity of time, then you're going to have problems. But if you're going for a holistic life that is trying to really look at each area of your life and overcome the weaknesses inside of those areas and begin to triumph over addictions one at a time, then it's just part of the process. You see, I don't know how many times that I failed and faltered in this recovery journey going through it. But the reality is though a just man falls 7 times, he gets back up again. And so understanding that you are trying to sprint, you are trying to do something great with your life and make forward progress in a very fast pace, and understanding that is that I can't go from crawling to sprinting, okay? Just like a child doesn't just magically mature overnight. And so this is the way this journey is that forward movement, progressing one step at a time, and really walking along this path and really relying on the strength and the mercy of God and coming to the throne of grace when we have need. And that is a far different mindset and a belief system. This will definitely take away the club of beating yourself up and thinking that you're going to somehow walk on water because you made a decision to get sober. And that's just nowhere close to reality. So, question of the day. When do you feel content, and how is contentment obtained? So we know this, that Paul said godliness and with contentment is a great gain. And certainly we brought nothing into this world, and we're not going to take anything out of this world. And my old pastor used to say that you never seen a hearse pulling a U-Haul, right? And that is all the accumulation of stuff and wealth and toys and all these things. They don't progress with us beyond. And so I think it's important to notice that, because it shifts our attention to focus on the things that matter. And I think this is what Jesus meant when he said, store up treasures in heaven, where moth and rust doesn't corrupt and where thieves can't break through and steal. And so he gave the mindset of this is that if I'm going to make deposits and I'm going to accumulate wealth, then it's going to be of the spiritual nature that is lasting. So here's where I find contentment. First of all, doing something meaningful like this podcast, like this ministry, like the groups that we have, all of this stuff is very meaningful for me. And it brings me a sense of fulfillment and contentment that I am doing my part. Now, here's the reality about injustice and all the things that are going on in the world. If each man would step up and to do his part, then there wouldn't be any problem, right? All the problems could be tackled if men would step up and do their part. And so I find within my sphere, in my realm of influence, if I do my part, if I step up and I be mindful of creating content and systems and podcasts and connecting, if I do these things, then I'm doing my part in my sphere of influence. And this makes me feel very content and very fulfilled inside of my life. Next to that, doing my part, okay? And that is that I look at my family, my faith, my fitness, and my finances and say, am I doing my part to live holistically? And when I feel most discontentment and that frustration begins to rise is when I'm not taking responsibility. When I'm pushing the responsibility upon God and He's like not releasing something into my life, and I'm like begging Him for it and doing this different religious stuff that we are taught to do, that's when the discontentment and the frustration rises. But I feel most content and most fulfilled when I'm making deposits inside of those areas of my life, and I know that I go to sleep at night and said, I did my part in my investment for my contentment and for my overall holistic life and fulfillment. And that makes me feel really good. Okay? And so you ask me, how can you be satisfied to the point where you're not disturbed inside of each area of your life? And that comes when you step up and you do what you know you can do and that you are empowered to do. Awesome stuff. So we're still talking about wisdom. We're talking about knowing wisdom. And what we just finished was knowing wisdom is really knowing the things that are freely given to us of God. And now we are stepping in a little bit farther. But Proverbs chapter 1, verse 2 says this, to know wisdom and to know instruction and to perceive the words of understanding. Now, all of this implies an intimately acquainted mindset with wisdom and with instruction, and that our minds and our eyes would be open with revelation and with knowledge to perceive. And that word perceive there means to see, to understand, to acknowledge the words of understanding. And so going into what God gives. Now, we're still talking about understanding. Wisdom is understanding the things that God has freely given to us. Now, inside of this is grace. Now, grace is a very hard topic for a lot of people, but grace is very attractive. For example, if you did a seminar and a webinar on grace, you would get a lot of people, right? If you did a seminar and webinar on sin, you wouldn't get so much. And so grace is definitely a very attractiveness to it, but I think there's a great misunderstanding also. So what we're going to talk about is wisdom is really knowing what is freely given to us by God, and understanding what is freely given to us is His grace, and not to really misunderstand the application, but then to fully understand how this is relevant inside of recovery. So James 4:6 says this, but He, speaking of God, that He gives more grace. Wherefore He says that God resists the proud, but He gives grace to the humble. Now, this is a powerful, powerful scripture inside of recovery. If we want to live inside of grace and be empowered by the Spirit of God, this is definitely the topic and the message that we need to receive. So what is grace? We go through the definitions, and the grace is God's divine influence upon the heart that makes us able. I'll say that again because it is truly one of the most powerful definitions that we have inside of faith. That grace is the divine influence upon the heart that makes us able. And so here's the reality when we struggle with addictions and with weaknesses, and we are living within our realm of capabilities and within our talent, skills, and resources, and they're not getting us very far, right? Here's one truth that I believe that people are pretty much, and I'm not saying 100% of the time, but people pretty much live up to their talent, skills, and resources. That means that they are living to their best ability with the coping skills and the knowledge that they currently possess. And so knowing that and understanding that, in my addictive state, there's not much capability there. Like, there's not much empowerment. There's not much power to live as I would like. In fact, it's very defeating. Has this mindset of being in bondage and being shackled and being chained to the sinful nature and obeying its lust. And so, but grace is something far different, that it makes us able. And that's what the real grace is that what we are looking for is ability. Like, what is the main complaint of men inside of Christianity? That we need the ability to carry out His will. And that there are a lot of standards and a lot of great things, but we don't measure up to those standards. And we don't have the ability within ourselves to be fully obedient, right? And we don't have the ability within ourselves to live this great and awesome life. So this is where self-help movements are very detrimental. And some of the religions of the world also, because it gives you all of this code of conduct. It gives you all of the standards of morality. And it gives you all of this clear vision of what is right? But what it does not do is give you the power and the ability to do it. And here's the reality of man's dilemma, and I know my dilemma personally, that I usually know what to do, right? But I don't have the motivation or the power or the ability to actually carry it out, which means that I don't have the discipline to do what I know is right. And so Christianity, faith, Jesus, what I'm talking about here inside of recovery, solves all that problem. And that is, if we're going to live inside of grace, we are understanding that it's not by my might, it's not by my power, but it's by His Spirit. And so then we start tapping into a new power to live by. Then we start tapping into the real concept of grace and God giving us the power and the ability to make us able. You look at your relationship with your wife and your marriage that is falling apart, or negative relationships that you have with your children, or just your relationships with people in general, and you look at that and say, I'm not able to fix it. And that's one coin of the truth. And I think it's really important that we do understand and get in touch with our frailties and begin to understand that it's not within our capabilities. I think that's probably a positive thing. And I know for sure 100% is a very positive thing inside of salvation, because we don't have the ability to measure up to the standard to receive eternal life. And that was the whole purpose of Christ coming to die and meeting the standard in 100% fashion for us. So we get that. So grace, divine influence on the heart that makes us able. So inside of our marriage, we're like I said, I'm not able to do that. Okay? But we live by grace. And that is, we have access to a power that is far greater than ourselves. And that power gives us the ability to be able. We look inside of our faith and it says, you know what, I'm not able to be like other men are. That they're on fire for God and they have this passion and they seem to be committed and they're 100% all in Christ. And you look at it and say, I don't have the ability to do that. Good. But now, if you have faith inside of His grace, He gives you the power and the ability to carry that out. Now we look inside our finances, or we look inside our body. It doesn't matter which area we go to. We can look at the abilities where it seems like we're not able to make progress and say, you know what, I may not be able, but I know somebody who is. And I know somebody who has the power, and He is willing, more than willing, to give me the grace and the empowerment to walk this thing out and to carry this thing out. So, do we as believers, we as men, can we truly say that I'm not able to do that, when we can tap into the power of His ability? That is an awesome reality. So grace is affecting, is the power of God affecting human life. And that is the supernatural coming and empowering the natural. And God's method and mode is to be in us and to work through us. And it's His power that is operating in this manner. So that is awesome. So grace is the power of God working in and through you to begin to manifest this new Christian life. And what begins to change first is our heart desires. We feel it. We know it. We know that we have these different desires. We are in conflict in a lot of different areas, where when we didn't have that relationship with God, there was no conflict, right? This is true evidence of something happening inside the soul and the conscience of man, that he actually feels conflicted about certain things. And now there is a struggle where once there was no struggle, right? And so we now enter into that new heart and that new transformation, and God begins to change the way that we think and the things that we want. And He begins to transform our desires, and we begin to want powerful things. And this is a process, I can guarantee you. Man, when I first, I was addicted to meth, and I was in deep. I went hard and fast inside of it. And I started experiencing, all the negative consequences and the pain involved with addiction. And, it brought me down to the lows and to the depths to cry out to God for help and assistance. And I just really got connected to that I didn't want to do this anymore. Now, even though I continued to struggle repeatedly, now all of a sudden there was conflict. Now all of a sudden there was struggle where there was no struggle before. You see, I didn't have any problem doing drugs before. No problem. I didn't have any conscience that bothered me one bit. I didn't have any desire not to do them. But when this calling out and this crying out to God for this transformation and experiencing the consequence and the pain of everything that I was doing to myself, all of a sudden, new desires and a new passion begin to emerge, but it was very small. And oftentimes it would get drowned out, but I would still come to that place of disgust, of looking at the situation and say, why am I doing this repeatedly? And this was the beginning of a heart transformation that began to happen. And this is definitely all His grace. So, inside of Christian circles, we get grace and mercy, we get it quite confused, right? And we think we're living in grace, and that grace has somehow become an excuse to maybe indulge in some sinful behavior or something like that. And Jude talks about that. He said, for there are certain men who crept in unaware, who were before ordained to this condemnation, ungodly men. And they turn the grace of God into lasciviousness. And what that means is that they take the message of grace and they turn it into lawlessness. And is saying, that's okay, we're under grace. And we hear that a lot. Oh, you're under grace, you're under grace, you're under grace. But the concept and the meaning behind it, people actually forget the real powerful definition behind it. Like, this grace somehow gives me a free pass to indulge in all these sinful behaviors because I'm under grace. This is the common belief system. But mercy is this. Mercy is strength, love, encouragement, and support when you fail. And that looking upon God, asking for forgiveness and requesting mercy, right? And that is the reaching out of our faith and God giving us mercy in the sense of when we fail. And that is an important part of the gospel, and I think it's very important. But grace is something that's far different. Grace is far empowering. Grace, once again, is His divine influence upon the heart that makes you able, that gives you the ability and the power to overcome these things. And all we need to do from our part is actually to believe that it has been provided for us and begin to walk into step inside of it. Now, that is far different from mercy. Grace means that I don't have to succumb to the sin if I don't really want to. Grace means that God's power is accessible to me, and I can utilize that power to live beyond that which I am able in the natural. And I don't know about you, but that is one of the most powerful beliefs inside of recovery. Now, in recovery, we could just go on and continue relying upon the mercy of God and fall into pornography repeatedly over and over, ask forgiveness, and just go through this cycle of sin, committing the act, asking for forgiveness, and relying on mercy, and all this and that. And what that shows me is that a person is not really established in grace. And that grace is the divine power that makes us able. And if we truly were tapping into that, if we truly believe that, then it would manifest in victory and overcoming that, and not simply relying on the mercy of God. That is a powerful reality. Paul says this, "For by one man's offense, death reigned," and he's talking about Adam. "But much more, they that receive the abundance of grace and the gift of righteousness will reign in life by one man, Jesus Christ." And so, I want to break this down for you because I don't want to skip over this. But the equation is this, that the abundance of grace and the gift of righteousness will cause you to reign in life. And that is through the agency and through the power of Jesus Christ operating inside of your life. If I know and understand this, that I have a right relationship with God, and that peace has been obtained, and that I am an object of His divine favor, and that He loves me, I am His child, and I am part of the family. And I understand that I have access to His resources and to His power to live beyond my ability. Those two core beliefs will cause us to reign in life. So I ask you this. There's a lot of men out there who are not reigning, obviously, right? Who are getting beat down by their sin and constant shame and guilt and regret and all of these different things, and they're not any form or fashion reigning in life. In fact, life is kicking their butt. And so it's clear evidence that they're missing these two ingredients, and that is fully understanding that the righteousness of God has been provided for you. And that is that you don't need to look into trust into your own righteousness, and that His grace is available to you. Now look, His throne is even called grace, right? And we learn this inside of Hebrews that says, let us, this is Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16, let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in the time of need. And so for two things come to the throne, which is called grace, is for when we need mercy, for times that we have failed and we have faltered and we failed to come to God and to trust in Him. But even more than that is to find grace to help. And what this means, grace to help, is divine assistance. And that is when I recognize this, when I understand that I need divine assistance, that power is available for me. Man, I experienced this in great fashion within the first couple months of recovery from meth. and ending up in a drug house in a situation that I didn't want to be in. I borrowed a friend's bike. I returned it. He said, come on in. And there we are in the circle, and the meth pipe is being passed around. And this reality of divine assistance became real for me. And that is, I knew I was in a situation that I didn't belong. I didn't want to be there. I got suckered. I got tricked. Satan set up a nice little plan for me to fall, right? And so as the pipe is getting passed around, I'm praying. I'm just like, I'm in deep. And the only thing that I could do physically to show the manifestation of my belief is to open my hand, right? And at that moment, it just felt like this extreme divine ability came inside of me. And I said, no, I got to be somewhere. I got to go. And the pipe passed to the next person past me. I left. I got out of the situation. And God taught me a lesson about divine assistance. And that is, if I'm willing, if I recognize that I'm in trouble, okay, and that I'm in a situation that I don't have the ability to handle, and I can come boldly to the throne of grace, and that is to really acknowledge God in that situation, and that the divine empowerment will come to me. You might ask yourself, what does this have to do with knowing wisdom? Knowing wisdom as a person, as God, and that He is there, and His grace and His divine ability is there for you to tap into, is one of the greatest wisdom nuggets that I can impart to you. If you want to know wisdom, knowing wisdom is knowing the grace of God and having the grace and the power of God operating inside of your life. So I want you to look at this, your family, faith, fitness, and finance, and say, where is grace not operating? Where am I trying to do it myself? Where am I not able to really get achievement and fulfillment? Is it inside my marriage? Is it with my relationship with my kids? Is it inside of my faith that I feel that I just don't have the ability and I'm not able? Is it inside your body, your health, your nutrition, and your fitness? Do you feel like you're not able? And lastly, maybe it's in your financial realm where you don't feel like you have the capability and you're not able. And what I want to lead you to is this, is that now's the time to live in grace. So whatever area where you feel like you're not able, good job, you learned the lesson that you don't have the ability. But now it's time to trust. Now is time to tap into grace that has been provided for you and understand this belief system. God has made me able. I can face this challenge and I can triumph over this difficulty because He is in me and He is working through me. Powerful reality.